Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight for our program, Chop It Up. My name is Isis Ferguson. I'm the Director of Engagement and Partnerships at Arts and Public Life. I imagine we've got a mix of familiar and new faces in our digital audience, so welcome. And thank you for joining us smack dab in the middle of dinner. If we were together, we would be eating around a table, probably sharing some drinks. So in the virtual world, we appreciate your time. If you haven't had a chance to visit Arts and Public Life and you're not familiar with our work, we're located in Washington Park. We've been around for 10 years. This is our 10th anniversary. We're a hub of exploration and expression and exchange. We center people of color, and all of the work that we do, whether exhibitions, residencies, arts education for young people, or creative entrepreneurship, is all geared toward fostering neighborhood vibrancy, which is apt for what we are discussing tonight. Tonight's program is the second in a three-part series, Chop It Up Black Wall Street Edition. We've invited three practitioners here tonight. They're gonna unpack the term and the state of Black economics by sharing not only their passion projects, the work that they do that they're paid for, the work maybe they do that they're not paid for, their businesses, and their hopes for Black liberation, all tied in through the conversation with some incredible historical connections to the Tulsa Race Riots and the work that Rick Lowe has been doing with his Black Wall Street Journey project. If you like what you hear tonight, please come back for the final conversation on Thursday, August 12th at 5:30 to 7 p.m. It's the final program. The same thread of Black economics will be woven through the conversation, and we'll be featuring three more community powerhouses. The Black Wall Street Journey edition of Chop It Up is presented. We have a lot of cooks in the kitchen, so I'm going to let you know who this is presented by and how you can see some of the individual work. So we're the featured presenter, but we're partnering with the Smart Museum of Art at the University of Chicago. Our friends at the Public Media Institute are with us through the entire series. And this work is really in conjunction with the multi-partner, multi-venue exhibition Toward Common Cause, Art, Social Change, and the MacArthur Fellows Program at 40. An incredibly long title, but really impactful work. All of this is curated by Abigail Winograd. So before we dive into the conversation, I just want to make a note. We have ourselves here together from 5:30 to 7. We're going to leave probably the last 20 minutes for Q&A. So we'll be accepting questions throughout the duration of the program. There's a few ways you can get questions to us. If you're joining us via Facebook, you can just drop your questions into the comments. If you are here on this webinar, we have a Q&A box where you can send us things. We will take those questions and we will hold them until the end, and then the moderator will be able to toss those right back to the panelists, and we'll try to answer your questions. If we don't get to your questions, we apologize, but there's a lot to discuss tonight, but make sure you just send them into the comments and we'll get them over. And then finally, I want to let you know that while Rick Lowe is a thought partner in this project, and this is really all led by him, he won't be able to join us tonight. He's traveling, but we do want to have you have a sense of this work that he's been doing, not just here in Chicago, but in Tulsa. And so most of the work, or most of the ways that folks are familiar with Rick's work, is through Project Row Houses. And it's a great project that really crystallizes participation, problem solving, and crafting social structures that actually amplify collective creativity. And that really is the impetus for Rick working here in Chicago on this multi-year project that is anchored by the centennial of the Tulsa Race Riots from 1921. So it's an observance of that, but really looking at the forms and structures that have been created in Chicago around Black wealth and Black prosperity. So tonight, we are hosted by Natalie Moore, and Natalie needs no introduction. Most of you know Natalie. So with that, I will turn it over to Natalie, who will introduce our speakers. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. Since we're not communing together with food and drink, if you want to drop in the chat what you're sipping on or what you're going to have for dinner so we can get a little bit of community, that'd be great. I am dealing, I think, with allergies. I know it's not COVID. So excuse me if I'm like wiping my nose with the Kleenex, and I am drinking lemon water. And I would like to introduce our guest this evening. We have Tiffany Joy, who is the founder and creator of Hemp Heals Body Shop, Ghian Foreman of Emerald South Economic Development Collaborative, and Anton Seals Jr. of Grow Greater Englewood. Welcome, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
So are you all eating, drinking anything this evening?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Either I am drinking just a cold cup of water, like you, no lemon, but just ice cold water.
Okay. Ghian, what about you?
I'm gonna get to the drinks after work.
You know, I am all for drinking during this discussion. You don't have to feel you have to have on your professional voice. You know, Tiffany, we're just meeting, but I talk to Ghian and Anton about this stuff all the time when I see them. So let's just relax and not feel like we're official and, you know, kick it for the next hour. So Tiffany, I'm gonna start with you. If you can tell us what your product is and what your origin story is.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks again for having me here. I really appreciate it. Well, my name is Tiffany Joy, and I am the founder and CEO of Hemp Heals Body Shop, which is my passion project. And it is basically a line of bath and body products infused with CBD. So my main product is a CBD pain relief salve. CBD is mainly used for pain, anxiety, and depression, as well as sleepless nights. So my top seller is always my pain relief salve. And the business kind of generated through my mom. My mom had to have knee replacement surgery a few years ago, maybe about 4 years ago now. And the doctor had prescribed her that ibuprofen 800, and it just did not do anything for her as far as the pain and to help her to go to sleep. So I'll be honest, I started my mom off with THC cookies. One of my best friends makes them, and I trust that she would make my mom, you know, a good batch, because you never know what you're getting out here on the black market. And it worked. The cookies worked just fine. Her favorite was the oatmeal cookies, and she was munching on those for about maybe 3 or 4 months. However, during that time, she did gain weight. So she came back to me and said, "Hey, Tiff, this is working, but I don't need the 30 or 40 pounds that she had gained." So she wanted me to find an alternative solution. So what I end up doing is just taking a little trip. My best friend and we took a little trip to Denver. And when we got to Denver, we went around to different dispensaries. I told one of the dispensary agents my mom's issues, and she began giving me CBD products, a CBD salve. And she began to explain to me the benefits of CBD, and that really just kind of started, you know, the foundation of the business. I collected numerous salves while I was visiting in Denver, brought them all back to my mom. She picked one that she liked, and we basically went in the kitchen to try to duplicate it with the help of the internet. YouTube University was our main go-to, and we just went through a lot of trials and errors, a lot of batches, giving it out to her church friends just to make sure that the product worked. And before you know it, I actually turned helping my mom into a business. So that's really how the business started. I would have never thought I would be in the CBD cannabis business right now. You couldn't have told me that 3 years ago.
Where can people get your products?
My products, you can definitely purchase them online on my website, hemphealsbodyshop.com. The Silver Room in Hyde Park also sells my products, as well as the Last Lap Runner store in Boxville on 51st in Indiana. They also sell my products as well.
How did you turn this into something for your mom to a viable business that could be sold in stores?
It really came out of need. If my mom hadn't got that surgery and didn't need, something to help her to go to sleep at night, then, that I wouldn't be in this business like I had mentioned before. But yeah.
Well, really what I mean is the capital, loans, what are the logistics for you doing this? And what kind of obstacles, if any, did you have?
Oh, plenty of obstacles. Well, I started with my own money. I didn't take out a loan. I didn't borrow any money. I only started with one product, and that was a product that I was focusing on with my mom. So maybe a few $100s to get some containers off of Amazon and buy my ingredients and kind of get the business started that way. And it's just been growing. So thankfully, I didn't have to, do any financing or secure loans from family and friends. I was able to just start up with the little funds that I had at the time, and just been building and growing from there. And a few of the obstacles that I've experienced, in the cannabis industry, we are very well underrepresented in this industry. So trying to tap into, like mentors just to get some kind of advice and leadership and, things of that nature has been a little bit crazy, but with the help of Arts Public Life, they have kind of helped me along the way. So I'm thankful for that. But one of the other challenges I encounter is marketing. Like other businesses, they are able to market on like Facebook and Instagram, and promote their products. And because I'm a CBD cannabis-based company, I'm not allowed to do so because CBD is still federally not regulated just yet.
Ghian, tell us about Emerald South, what its goals are, and what you all are working on currently.
Sure. So Emerald South was created primarily as a result of the Obama Center coming to the south side of Chicago, to Jackson Park. And so, when that happened, community members, City of Chicago, University of Chicago came together and said, look, we need to make sure that we find a way that community will actually benefit from the center coming here, and not just that people will come, go to the center and leave, but how will our communities actually benefit from it? So I was hired maybe about 2.5 years ago. And we came together, kind of reworked our mission and really thought about it as an organization that will focus on shared pride, shared power, and shared investment. That the opportunities for one community will be an opportunity for all of the communities. A loss for one community is a loss for all of the communities, right? And to really think about how do we create these strong communities that we once had in our communities, viable communities, self-sufficient communities. And so that's really kind of what we're working on, to take the resources that we have to work efficiently with those to ensure that that our communities are able to prosper.
And Anton, tell us what Grow Greater Englewood is up to and what the organization is.
Yeah, so Grow Greater Englewood started as a coalition back in 2014, essentially as an outfit to make sure there were more Black farmers, in particular people of color, growers in Englewood, in particular Black farmers. And it was a rehash of what was there before, which was the Greater Englewood Gardeners Association, called GUA. And it all kind of grew out of the quality of life planning process in one part or the another. And so myself and Sonia Harper were convening a group, and then we created a CBA for the Whole Foods. And so that's kind of how it started. That, usually when you have a CBA, it's usually an acrimonious community versus a corporate entity. I
just want to, in case people don't know, Community Benefits Agreement, CBA, and Sonia Harper, who is now the state rep for Englewood.
Yep. And also the chair of the Agricultural Committee for the state of Illinois. So, it kind of morphed out of that, but the upshot there was that Walter Robb, who was the then CEO of Whole Foods, not only didn't resist what the demands were, thought that he could do them and then go beyond those. So that's, I always lift that story up as the beginning of our, that, activism and organizing works, and it doesn't always have to be acrimonious. Now, we were definitely surprised by that. But since then, what we've grown into as an organization is really focusing on land, in particular in Englewood, around this urban ag zone, and this kind of intersection between agriculture, community wealth building via land ownership and tenure in our community. So Englewood is probably the second, if not first, community that has the most city-owned vacant lots in the city of Chicago. So, you know, there are hundreds of them in the greater Englewood community. And when we say greater Englewood, we're saying Englewood and West Englewood. So Grow Greater Englewood helps to kind of secure the land and to help provide technical assistance for farmers. And then also thinking about a solution for those farmers as a market solution to work together in the collective. And that's where the Englewood Village Farmers come, which is made up of several different groups who are independent farmers: Your Bountiful Harvest, DuSable City Ancestry Winery, or Botanic Gardens, Urban Growers Collective, Sisters in the Village, Getting Grown Collective. So we're working as a kind of collective and coming up with a market and also, you know, value-added products. My brain has been in overdrive today, so I'm like searching for all the words. Those words tonight. I'm like,
you're doing all right.
Struggle bus. But that's one part, and the other big part is behind me. What you see is what we've been working on, which is the Englewood Nature Trail, which is a 2-mile long trail. We just kind of wrapped a kind of re-updated planning process, and we'll be, you know, really looking at, you know, how this would be stewarded and done, you know, through community control. So we call it the non-606 approach, with, you know, looking at, you know, 3 drivers: anti-displacement and sustainability. So we know that when these kind of projects come in our community, you know, that they usually are seen as an entry point for gentrification. And so we want to kind of disrupt that notion around that, you know, in Black spaces that we can create and things can be beautiful and reflect the vibrancy in our own community, and push back against the kind of dominant narrative that pretty much all of us in American culture believe, is that when something improves in a community like, you know, an Englewood or a Woodlawn, that means that white people are coming. And so I think
that it's not for us.
And it's not for us, that the improvements aren't for us. And then lastly, we're also working to establish the Englewood Land Trust. Since there's so many vacant lots, how do we also stabilize the community, which is right now is under threat from, you know, a lot of tax scavenger sales. So there's a lot of layers to this besides just our work around farming. So it's a holistic approach in that community. And we're definitely African-centered around our approaches to the collective kind of and self-determining kind of principles that are our guiding factors.
I want to remind the audience that they can put questions in the Q&A on Facebook, and also in the chat that we have here. You know, if you hear something you like, or, you know, you want to co-sign, or you have a different point of view, put that in. I see, because I know her, as Sophia Rashid, doing urban farming work. And so I want to stay on urban ag for a minute. Anton, how do you see that tied to Black economic wealth, while also making sure that this doesn't become a northern sharecropping situation?
Well, I think one, the reason that we exist, and I'm glad Sophia, if she's out there, then big shout out to Your Bountiful Harvest, who has been with us since our inception. We've approached this as a collective, and part of the work is not, you know, people think of urban ag, but it's a larger food system. So it's not just the growing of the food, and it's not just in the urban spaces. So it's an urban, peri-urban, and rural connectivity. So our work expands beyond just this one neighborhood and it's also broader in the national context as well, through our partnership with the National Black Food Justice Alliance. So there is tremendous amount of work that is underway to kind of reconfigure the distribution, the logistics of how, when farmers are growing, how does that food end up on the table? In different ways it ends up on the table. So, the different kind of value-added products. Tiffany's talking about one of them, which is also an agricultural crop, which is cannabis and its cousin hemp. So we, have been exploring hemp as a co-op. We started that, very early on. So, part of the the strains have been around the capacity and raising capital. So, which is across the board for Black businesses in its entirety, no matter what sector. But the food industry in particular is one of the largest industries in the state of Illinois. And so we have to think about and it's also the irony is that, you know, our agrarian roots 2 generations ago is what, well, from the beginning, is what brought us to this country to begin with, and why we were brought here and, you know, during that enslavement period. And we always talk about, you know, just to make sure that the historical component is there, that it was not just for our labor. I think people often think of, you know, in the enslavement period as just, it was also an extraction of the technology that Africans, particularly West Africans, had in terms of taking care of the earth as the first stewards of the earth. So that was also why the Europeans tapped into those people who were rice farmers and bean farmers, because they knew how to irrigate and take care of the land in a much more advanced way than many of the Europeans who could not do that at the time. And so that's where the genesis of the cotton gin and all that comes from. So, you know, we see urban ag as just as a component of a larger economic play.
If I could add on to that, at Emerald South, we started a program called Terra Firma. And in the 10 South Lakefront communities that we work on, from Bronzeville down to South Chicago, we identified over 200 acres of vacant land. Probably somewhere around 40% of it is city-owned land. City of Chicago recently came out with the Inspector General came out with a report that basically says the city does not take care of its land. The city frequently sells lots for $1 and they go unsold. We don't see this land as an asset. On a balance sheet, it shows up as an asset. And so we developed a program to clean and green and activate, utilize natural plantings to improve the communities. And this program was done in Philadelphia. This is the program we have is based on a program done in Philadelphia. But we wanted to utilize natural plantings that have other kinds of benefits, things like phytoremediation, removing lead from the soil, or you know, helping to divert storm water, so to hopefully, you know, with time, where you don't get water in your basement after a rain like last week. So we utilize the thing like that. And so what we're thinking about is how can we use this asset that's a land, you know, asset, this land, which is an asset, how can we utilize that to improve other things and to protect against other vulnerabilities like fly dumping, right? Like speculation, like Anton talked about, the tax buyers coming in and acquiring things, to see some value in it. And at the same time, while we're thinking about that, to create some jobs. In Philadelphia, when they did this program, there was over 300 individuals from the community that were ended up hired to take care of this program, 12 entrepreneurs. They did a study and found that people's sense of mental health and well-being was improved by 69%. Violent crime was reduced by 27%. Property values increased by $41,000, by $18,000. So, you know, there's so much that kind of goes into it. And so at the same time, while we're saying, hey, you know, let's improve the way our neighborhood looks and let's improve the environmental benefit, let's start to attract some Black families back to these communities, right? So we have a goal to attract another 10,000 Black families back. How do we use this as an opportunity to develop Black developers who can rebuild some of these communities, right? Thinking about the commercial corridor opportunities that exist. So I think that, you know, the urban ag, it's more than just farms, right? It's thinking about the land itself and making sure that we value the land itself.
Depending on who you talk to, the Obama Center in cannabis is either a boon or a bust for Black neighborhoods. So I want to dig some more and talk about these two opportunities. And with cannabis, how can there be more Tiffany's, more people who are licensed to grow and to sell, dispensaries, you know, putting that hemp into wine? And I know, Anton, this is something that you are very close to.
Yeah, I didn't say that. I wear a few different hats, so I'm also, but I'm going to defer to Tiffany, but I also have a cannabis company called Ours.
I did not know that.
I do. And like the hundreds of other applicants, and then I'll talk a little bit more about that after Tiffany. But ours is OURS. It started about 3 years ago with a group of folks that I kind of grew up with who were cannabis enthusiasts, growers, and it's for organic urban revitalization solutions. And we also saw that as an opportunity to help as come into the industry, not just as growers, but also in terms of the distribution, which is the dispensaries, but then also the infusing component. So I won't talk ad nauseum about it, but yeah, so I'm definitely knee deep in cannabis. So next time you ask somebody like what they drink, you should ask them like what they smoke.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Maybe Anton wasn't drinking.
Okay.
And just to piggyback off of what Anton was saying, I mean, for minorities to get into this business, it does take a lot. I know quite a few people that are trying to open up a dispensary, and the state of Illinois, the laws is a little crazy. So they only have a limited number of dispensaries that they can open at one time. And then if you are trying to get in on the cannabis side of things, you need to determine whether you want to get in on like the THC side or the CBD side, because they are both regulated quite differently. The THC side of things is regulated much more heavily than CBD. So with CBD, and that's the field that I'm in, I have a lot more leeway, and it doesn't cost as much to get into the industry as it would if I was, just mainly THC based. And we all know THC is the component that causes the euphoric high. So I'm assuming that is the reason for the heavy legalities around cannabis. But I say, if you want to get in it, jump in. I mean, connect with, it's a few of us out here that are open. I mean, even in the city of Chicago, I've networked with quite a few organizations that assist minorities in opening a dispensary, or if you want to start your own hemp store or a CBD store, there are resources out here that you can tap into. And I am one of them. Everybody that I meet, I tell them, if you want to get into it, hey, let's set up a Zoom call and I can show you the way that I did it so that you can, maneuver around that red tape. But to get into it on the TH side of things, and Anton can probably talk more about that with the social equity, I know it's quite expensive. So a lot of people that go that route is usually a group of people versus one person. For example, and Anton can attest to this, I believe you have to have maybe like $500,000, for example, in the bank, just sitting there, in order for you to open up, before you can open up the dispensary. Like, you have to have that cleared. Am I right? Is that still the rule?
Well, not for the current, but I mean, for the recreational, you didn't have, that was for the medicinal, which was a huge barrier initially. Yeah. But there was also the cultural component at that particular time, several years ago, because Chatham would have been the first Black-owned dispensary and person. And the importance here is, Ghian and yourself, in capitalism, it's who's first to the market as well. But it always is having market position, so it's another set, that language of capitalism. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting that we're talking about this around Black Wall Street, because, Black people, Africans, are the center of the capital market in and of itself. The global capital market was built off of, not only our labor, but the trade of our bodies. So it's a real, confluence. Like, that's how the, what we now call white people, Europeans, particularly Western Europeans, made a lot of their money, was through the sale and from the free labor. So the home of the brave and, land of the free was that they got free land because they had taken it from the indigenous, and they had free labor that, our ancestors provided. And so that is the legacy that we're still, living out. So then when we talk about Black Wall Street, we talk about, us participating in the capital markets, and then the direct kind of assault that, white terrorism had always, pushed back. And that's kind of what we're living through right now, is that, that there had to be a limit around who and what could have control over, industry. Yeah. So that's at the core of racism.
Well, I'm glad. I was going to pivot to that later, but since we're talking about language, that's something that I did want to talk about. Like, relationship do you have around capitalism? I mean, I have been on record saying that Black capitalism is not going to save Black folks. It's racialized, like there's exploitive elements to it. But at the same time, we all participate in the system because we have to eat. We, want to buy homes. Whatever it is that we want to do. And what we're talking about is a form of capitalism, whether it's, starting a new business, cultivating land. But given how exploitive and racial and how it is tied to white supremacy, what is your relationship to capitalism? How do you think about these things? I'm gonna ask the B school, the MBA, start with the MBA.
This is America. You got to have some money, period. Right? Now, do you have to have billions? No, but I kind of start thinking about you have to have the basics, right? Food, clothing, shelter, and peace, right? You're missing one of those elements, you're in big trouble, right? And you can see this in our communities right now. We're missing a lot of those elements, right? I personally think the way that you can get a lot of those things is by having some money. You might not be able to get peace, right, by money, right? But you can get some of those other things. And so we have to find a way, I believe, to make sure that we have the resources that we need to be able to make sure, if we just focus on our children, to make sure that they have what they need to continue to grow. Just like, when you're growing up, you don't know if you're poor or not. You have what you have. And so I think that it's critical that Black capitalists, that we give back to make sure that, some of these communities, the work that Anton is doing in Englewood, so these kids can say, yo, when I was a kid, I used to play on the Englewood Trail, and they don't have to think about the fact, they don't know all the work that it took, all the dollars that Anton is going to have to go raise to go do that, right? That won't be a factor to them. But without the money, it won't happen. Anton has been talking about this for the last 10 years, right? We need some money to be able to do it. My hypothesis is if there were more Black millionaires, it would be easier for Anton to get it because he could make a few calls instead of the calls that he's making right now, begging everybody, please, this is what we want to do. You could call 5 or 6. You could call a John Johnson, a George Johnson, and say, man, let me get 2 blocks done. And once I prove that, let me go get a couple more done. We don't quite have that same kind of network. So
do you mean more Black millionaires in Chicago, or are you talking in general? Okay.
In Chicago. Everywhere, but let's talk about it in Chicago first. I think first, to make sure that we have people who love Chicago, who care about Chicago, who will support Chicago. And then we can take it beyond that after that. But right now, I think we kind of have to start with who's going to be willing to support at home. And so we always try to find a way to do the potluck where we work together. Hey, Tiffany, Joy, what can you bring over? Anton, what can you bring? Natalie, what do you bring? Right? We do that, right? And that's how we've been surviving for a long time. I don't think right now, it's not about surviving, because we're really not really surviving that much, really, right? When you look at the gap of the wealth gap and how that's growing and how that impacts so many other things, the health gap, right? So I believe that we have to be able to have some money to be able to really make some changes in this country.
I agree. I think I would just add that, our thrust is not just from Black capitalism, so I agree with you, Natalie. I don't believe Black capitalism, because we have that already. I think, I think about when I talk about all these spaces, both in Englewood and in South Shore, the people who are in pop culture who kind of dominate the narrative around Black success come from these communities. So I'm talking about like a Kanye West and all of those folks that he's, the Virgil app, all those folks come from this neighborhood. And then you talk about the whole, drill, the drill music scene, and, G Herbo to the Lil Durks, they arise out of these communities. And so, part of it is the conundrum, because, they're wearing $1 million on their face without question, you know what I mean? So money becomes just a parlay. So there's something there that needs to be further investigated and interrogated about that. When it comes to something like the Englewood Nature Trail, our position is not just the private funding, which, yeah, you can do that. You can go and fundraise. So like the 606, the city didn't put a lot of skin in the game. They may have spent like $5 million on that, right? The rest came from wealthy donors, right? Who own, are barons of capital in not only this city, this is just, they may be based here, but they do work all over the globe, right? And they saw fit because they also had other interest in that community. So what we're saying in communities like Englewood is that, especially in the last 50 years, I would say, and we talked about this before, Natalie, around the push around public-private partnerships, same thing that's happening with the Obama Center, is because capitalism and because the rich have gotten so much richer through tax cuts, is that they have much more sway. So the public purse strings that are supposed to be shared, there should be a check, $20 million, $25 million to do something like, it's the least that the city of Chicago could do in a community that in it itself divested in, right? This community looks the way it does. Woodlawn looks the way it does because we had a policy called the Trouble Building Initiative that raised these communities in several years, right? And also then the other big misnomer is that when white flight happened, that there's some kind of way that they left. They didn't leave their assets. They still owned them, and they still own them to this day. And they sit back and they wait, right, until those assets are worth more. So it is, there's a lot there in terms of like having a new conversation around, and we don't quite have that in our policy making now. That the boldness around what belongs to the public. Right? And who should be paying for this, right? And right now, like Ghian said, like we're trying to figure out how do we pay for the public to remain safe, right? But this is a part of the public itself divesting, and we're dealing with the decay of when you close schools, when you close, these things have impacts, not right away, but over a series of years. And then, we can investigate them, but there's no conversation around the conversation is like, well, we don't want to spend more money there, or we don't have the money. And that's also a racialized context, because that means that white tax dollars have to go into communities in a different way than the way that they would like for them to happen. But
so here's the thing. You just said it yourself. It's so much city-owned land that's over there, right? White tax dollars are going to it, right? What is city land? So let's use the capitalist system to our advantage. Let's leverage the value of all of that land to get your trail done, to get a school fixed, to improve upon some of the vacant land that exists. Let's use this, since this is the system that we're in, let's utilize the system to the benefit of our communities.
And I'm not, just to be clear, it's not an either or. It was, it's a both. I mean? It's about, the public, especially now that we're getting tax dollars in, how are those things going to be allocated? And then also, how do we, utilize, like what Tiffany's building, like, well, how come she can't have a plant in these communities, right? In order to process, the processing, which is the isolate and the distillate that create the CBD, right? Right way, she should be able, there should be resources to help jumpstart these kind of companies that create industries. That's what government has always played a role in doing. That's how all these white folks made millions of dollars. They keep lying, saying like they just had money like sitting on the side. No, they got city contracts, they got underwritten, and there was no question about it. So like, that's the only part I'm saying is like the historical context is like, they got the money already because they were able to go and have no big contracts 60 years ago. So again, I think it's both of those things.
So we can, talk about the problems, for the next 45 minutes, but I want to pivot to imagination. And Tiffany, I want to start with you. Because I was going to ask you, Anton mentioned it, like, do you want your own plant? Like, what is it that you want long-term, let's say 10 years from now? What do you want your business to look like?
Well, 10 years from now, I definitely would love to have my own hemp farm and grow my hemp so I can get it from, from plant to product. basically, right? But because I don't have that kind of setup right now, I'm dependent upon my supplier in Denver to supply me with the isolate and the distillate that I need to go into my products that I hand make. So, I mean, 10 years for me would be having my own hemp farm so that I can do just that. It would be CBD vending machines, Hemp Hills Body Shop vending machines. That is like my biggest dream ever.
Where
all the clinics.
Yes.
Where would you want your farm to be?
I mean, here, Chicago, I love Chicago, but if it's here in Chicago, I would assume it'd have to be indoors. But I am an outdoorsy type person. I mean, I lose control of that, but I would like it to be outdoors, probably in the South.
You could get a hoop house.
I mean, that too. I mean, I'm open for an indoor space because I know when you do it indoors, you have more control. You don't have the pesticides. You don't have to worry about all of that. But I am an outdoorsy type of gal. So I like the idea of having just my own outdoor farm. But if I can do it indoor, that'd be great too. But again, I would need some assistance in walking me through those steps and what that would look like and how I can do that from start to finish.
What are you struggling with the most right now?
Marketing, because I can't do much with social media. What I've done is connect with other businesses or like-minded businesses so that they can promote me and my products in front of their audience that I wouldn't have privy to if it wasn't for them. So I'm trying to find like strategic marketing ways to get my product in front of people that don't even know about me or Hemp Hills Body Shop. So marketing is always like my number one thing.
Ghian, what does the Emerald South ring look like 10 years from now?
Well, I already said it. I think that I would like to see another 10,000 Black families come to the South Side, right? Some of those 10,000 will be occupying our schools that we plan on improving. We'll be living in homes that we can develop and build ourselves. We'll open up businesses, right? That we'll find some partnerships, true partnerships between some of these businesses located in the community and some of our anchors like the University of Chicago, Museum of Science and Industry, IIT, City of Chicago, you know, some of those contracts that Anton talked about. University of Chicago was awarded a federal hub for quantum computing. So who knows what kind of technology that's going to bring, right? But if our communities can have a symbiotic relationship with that, as we're talking about infrastructure dollars coming to, you know, from the federal government coming to our communities, I would like to see the infrastructure that we have. We have the red line, the green line, the metro, right? I would like to see all those things improved, right? And just, you know, a community, right? Something that's self-sufficient. Where it's not necessarily that you have to be a millionaire to live in these communities, but you have access to healthcare, you have access to food, to quality housing, right? And so just truthfully, you know, kind of when I break things down, I break it down to, you know, I think I had a good childhood growing up. And so if we can try to find a way to make sure that our young people have a way to have the best probability to have a good childhood. I serve on the Chicago Police Board. I had an opportunity yesterday to meet with some young men out in Roseland with Arnie Duncan. And, you know, man, hearing from these guys, you know, these are the shooters. They're not shooters today, but they were the shooters and they've been shot. And they don't want to live like this. They want opportunities, right? But the way they described it is no stores, there's no banks, there's no businesses, no jobs. They feel trapped in their community. This is the only place where they can be safe is the 4 blocks that they get to travel around, right? And you know, at the same time, I go downtown or to the north side, and it looks like it is no pandemic, right? So how can we provide opportunities for the communities in which we live and work, that our young people will have the opportunity to kind of to see something down the road, not just to kind of think about living today. So that's kind of how I think about it. I want to use the Obama Center really as a springboard to create some self-sufficiency for ourselves.
That is very important. I'm sorry, I didn't want to cut you off, but I just wanted to piggyback off his point and just saying that I think, getting down to the youth, like the youth is like our future. So when you guys were talking about, if we had a few millionaires here in Chicago, then, Anton can just tap into those millionaires and we can get, whatever funding that's needed for the community. And prior to my Hemp Hills business, I used to educate teens, high school teens specifically, about just building generational wealth and building generational wealth through entrepreneurship, real estate, as well as stock investments. And I was doing it over there at the Gary Comer Youth Center. And what I found out with these students is that a lot of them, they don't know, what they don't see outside of their neighborhoods. So when I started to see that, what I did was I took them outside of the neighborhood and we went on a trip, to similar to the north side. And I took them to a space to where it was nothing but successful Black people, and just to have them to look at other people and say, hey, that person looks like me. If he's doing it, I can do it. If she's doing it, I can do it. So my main goal for them was to just get out your neighborhood and see what else is out there. It's a whole world out there, and just to build generational wealth in our community so that when Anton do need that funding, we can tap into our own communities to make that happen. So I think tapping into the youth is highly, highly important, because everybody, can't go to college, can't afford to go to college, don't need to go to college, whatever that situation may be. And if they need another alternative, I think that, starting their own business, getting into real estate and learning about stocks and building that generational wealth in our communities, that will help long term.
I want to read a comment from the chat from Elder Anton Seals Sr. The failure of urban America is more than ever very visible. Local, federal, state, city millionaires, leaders, policy writers must support the models you all are talking about to bring into manifestation. This discussion must become part of the national discussion, planning, marketing, investors, grants, and finally implementation of the Englewood Nature Trail, companies birthing entrepreneurs and incubators for African Americans being positioned to direct at every level, a holistic approach to give life and hope to the least, to level the playing field. Thank you, Elder Seals. I think you might be related to someone on this panel, a little biased about the trail.
I would say that, the reason I'm even in Englewood is our family is from Englewood, from 56 in Princeton. My grandmother and my grandfather, both graduates of Englewood High School class of 48 and 47, respectively. And all of the Seals, that was the local high school at the time. But one of the things I was just, when you guys are talking about the next 10 years, is I think that there's so much synergy across. So I would just say, being kind of an interrupter in that sense, that there is already, how we often position segregation, and this conversation of segregation is one from, as Toni Morrison would cite, like from white gaze, like, oh, if we, integrate these neighborhoods, then things will improve, or we usually cite those kind of, but I think that there's also, there's truth in that, but there's also the other side of it, which is that there's truth in, that is also what gives Black Chicago its thing, its shtick, is because we're all together. And there's a power there that I think that is also not utilized. And that's what I'm most hopeful for, is the Ghians of the world, the Tiffanys of the world. Like, I see more of that interconnection, that more kind of intentionality being birthed. And so I think of the synergy of all of that that's happening across, demonstrating that. And then the other thing is, like, in communities, I think, yes, there are young people who are not exposed, but there are so many young people who are savvy, who are, above and beyond using the digital platform to make themselves out of nothing. So there's this, I think sometimes the narrative is that there's deficits only. And we have to look at it from both sides, is that there's also assets. These young people out here are super entrepreneurial. I mean, they are making money. They may not be saving that money, but they are making money. They are, and we have this in the community, like the licks that people come up with. That's a common language that we talk about. We have seen probably more three-reelers in this last several months than you probably seen in your entire life. Like the South Side and West Side of Chicago, Black Chicago is a thing. So I think it's often, sometimes we talk about it in such a negative sense that it has to also give birth to, not just in terms of a class kind of picture of what Black Chicago is, but it's the diversity of all of those things that make Black Chicago, that gives Chicago that edge, that makes it you could say arguably the Black capital of the United States in that way, because you have all of these different layers. And so I think that that's something that we should interrogate and investigate. And those are the things I'm looking forward to in the next 10 years.
Ghian, talk some more about the Obama Presidential Center and the type of positive impact that you think it can have.
So, I mean, I think there's the obvious things, that there's going to be some construction jobs, significant construction jobs related to it, almost $1 billion project. There's going to bring almost 1 million visitors a year. There's going to be programs bringing people from around the world to this place, thought leadership, as well as bringing local leadership from around the city to this place to kind of talk about how do we take ideas and grow them, scale them within our communities, or take ideas from other places. But then I think when I start to think about kind of on the more micro level, I start to think about, when those 1 million visitors go in and when they buy an iced tea, will that iced tea be made somewhere in our neighborhood? Or will that coffee be brewed someplace? Or will that postcard be printed, or a t-shirt printed in somewhere in our neighborhood? So I'm even thinking about the micro levels of those things. I'm thinking about the fact that the Presidential Center is here on the south side of Chicago, and it starts to change the minds of people and start to say, wow, this place is important, right? Because you can ask people right now and they're like, man, I can't wait to get out of here. That's kind of obvious by the population decrease. But if a person believes that this place is important, right, and you see an opportunity where you can make a living kind of based on something that's here. When the steel mills closed, beginning 70s, 80s, there was no industry to ever replace it, right? So those were homes that were purchased, cars that were bought, right? Stores that were shopped in, bars. And we don't have that now, right? So this is something we have to recreate. So this is a major investment that we have coming that hopefully spurs additional investment into these communities, right? And I think, the Obama Center, it's a big investment. It dwarfs in comparison to what the University of Chicago spends annually. So how can we crack into that? How can we identify other opportunities, right? We're talking about a rail line here. That's an industry that's not shrinking. How can we tap into that? How can we utilize the resources that exist in our communities? I'm not sure that we'll ever get the kind of resources that we need to make our communities whole. So how do we take what we have? Right, we've proven that we can take what we have. We can take weeds growing on the side of the road, add a little vinegar, ham hock to it, and we got collard greens, right? So we are people who know how to add a little flavor to it. So how can we take this moment in time using this big resource that we have coming in, a lot of attention on our communities, and use that as positive momentum to grow the rest of our communities, right? Hyde Park High School is across the street. There's no reason that shouldn't be the best high school in America. There's no reason why. We have companies like Google in Chicago. Why couldn't we say, hey, Microsoft, Google, invest in this school? It should be hands down the best technology-enabled school, in the city for sure, right? There's a new sports facility that's associated with the Obama Center. No reason that Hyde Park doesn't have access to those. So I think that we have to think about it once again. I kind of boil everything down to our young people. If we create an environment for our young people, we will end up with the next generation of Black entrepreneurs, doctors, philanthropists, lawyers, city workers. We have to create that environment. We have to create an environment like where Anton's grandparents grew up, or where my grandparents grew up, where they had access to everyone, right? My grandmother tells stories of Nat King Cole playing piano in between class, right? And we got that. It's just that it's hip hop now, right? So we have access to that in our community. So how do we use this as a way to springboard our young people to really kind of create the futures that we really want them to have?
Ghian, a couple of times this evening, you have used the phrase self-sufficiency.
Yeah.
And I want to ask more about what you mean by that. And is that tied to what you think economic freedom is?
Yeah. So, you know, I could take this a lot of different places, but so just a simple way. I stopped driving about 2 years ago. Right. And in doing so, I lost 30 pounds. I ain't got no red light cameras, no parking tickets, no speeding cameras, no city sticker, no, none of that stuff. Right. No maintenance, no insurance, nothing. So actually, by getting rid of something that we all strive for, I actually became more wealthy. Right. I became healthier. It's like I got recess in between each meeting, because while you got to get in the car, you stuck in traffic, I'm moving, I'm having fun. On nice days. I'm not talking about cold weather days, but on nice days, right? And so that created some self-sufficiency. It doesn't matter what gas prices are for me. And so for me, I think about it to be able to say, if we got a series of gardens around, then we really shouldn't be talking about food insecurity. If I can create a system where I can go and I can have access to some food, I have access to Tiffany, I now have something that can help me with my pain, some medicine or my depression, right? So I think that we need to think about what is really truly important to us, right? Our ancestors have far less than what we had, right? And they had different struggles. They couldn't, you know what I mean? The rules were very clear in terms of what you could and could not do as a Black person. I think the rules are still very clear. It's just not as overt right now in terms of what expectations are. And so I believe that we have the ability to kind of think about how we can create incomes for ourselves, how we can create an educational system for ourselves, a health system for ourselves that make us, how can we extend our age that we live, right? How can we create you know, you talk about the values, one of the slides, the values of our home. Well, that's for me. If I don't really want to sell my home. I would love to leave my home to my daughter, right? The same way we still have land in Mississippi or in Oklahoma. We still have land, right? So the value of it, yeah, I want to use the capitalist system to leverage to be able to go get some more things, right? But at a certain point, we have to think about those next generations and what it takes. If I own a business if you look at an ecosystem, right, these things all kind of have to work in tandem with each other, right? So you think about Detroit, Ford, they make cars, but somebody makes tires, somebody makes seatbelts, somebody makes this, somebody makes that. In our community, we got the same thing. When the projects were up, that was really a great example of self-sufficiency. There wasn't no stores around there, but you knew where you could go, somebody's apartment, knock on the door, buy some sugar, buy something else. You know, you go into barbershops, you can buy whatever you want to buy in a barbershop. So we create these informal systems, but I think that we need to get to a place where we really start to think about what's important. And as we think about what's important, we can create these systems by which we can support ourselves.
Even though we've talked about how little public investment comes to our neighborhoods, it's about 7 times as much as private investment that comes. And so then that's at least when I look at, that's the conundrum. The investment that does come is public, it's not enough. We haven't talked a lot about the role of philanthropy, and do you think that should fill in the gaps, or how do you, is it pressuring the multinational corporation banks to come into the community? How can you be self-sufficient when you still need that capital and no one wants to come to your community?
Yeah, but so I know that that's a fact. I know that's a statistic, but I think it's a misleading stat. The money does come in, but it comes in to support things, affordable housing. right?
Which part do you think is the misnomer?
It's 7 times the amount of these public dollars coming in, but it's not public dollars coming in saying, hey, Anton, here's public dollars so you can grow your business. Tiffany, so you can grow your business. It's public dollars coming in saying, we're going to support this low income affordable house, which is needed, right? So if it's 7 times, let's do 14 times. Let's do 7 towards those programs that support, you know, the needs that we have, so we can, because that 7 times is still not getting us the baseline, right? So how can we get that 7 plus another 7 to help Tiffany grow her business, Anton grow his business, right? And then those are the people who are going to hire the other, where the 7 times is going in. So it's a real challenge that we have, because just looking at it statistically, numerically, it looks like that there's a lot coming in, but it's to support all the things that's not coming in. Hyde Park High School doesn't have a library, right? So when you start to talk about the fact that all of these dollars are coming in, it's not, the dollars aren't going into the right places to help us get out of the situation that our communities are in.
I mean, it may also be that, as dollars, I mean, we're onto something around, how, all of the incentives that have been, that's something that we're looking at now as a city. So if you think about, like, philanthropic groups, I'm also, a board member, a trustee of a philanthropy organization. And, we're looking at, how do we use our corpus, which is the amount that was endowed, that we're just reinvestment. We're only using a small portion of that every year in order to provide grants. So it gets at the core of, like, well, what's this corpus for if it is into perpetuity, if it's not going to resolve some of these huge issues? And part of what we know in terms of, there's a few things that Black capital, in talking about this capitalism, the challenge is always access to the kind of capital, or the risk that, is inherent when you're talking about investing. We see this in housing, but this is kind of the Black tax. This is the legacy of racism in this country, right? That, that you undervalue our homes, or that if you have a great idea, you can't scale up in order to grow, to compete, because there's not, you present too much of a risk for the capital to get behind, right? And then when you also peel back the layers in terms of where that capital would be less risk adverse, which is through, the city of Chicago is a business. So if you think about this city being made up of about 67 to 70% Black and Mexican people. So this is a people of color city, basically, right? But then you look at, like, who got all of the contracts for the city continuously. So when we start talking about equity and, repair or reparational economic, that would mean that some of the folks who have been eating 12 scoops of ice cream would have to give up something. And that's at the core of what we're really talking about. They ain't trying to give it up. So they're being greedy and selfish, but they want it at the same time, saying that we're all in this together. We're not all in this together, right? So, and what we do know is that those organizations, those businesses that have those contracts are steadily growing. They parlay that to then go into the private sector and then to be able to raise that capital. That is how they're doing it, right? And so, and that's how other immigrant groups have also followed that lead. And it is intentional often that they will, there's a few Black folks, and we can probably name all 7 of them, right, who are able to get through this narrow window, right? And we also don't want to compromise them, because, everything is then thrust on them as the leaders of the Black community, right? So I'm sure John Rogers gets a gazillion, like, help us out, John, you're the millionaire here, right? And in the white community, there's thousands of John Rogers who go nameless, who are sitting on millions of dollars of cash. And then when you investigate how they made their money, you realize, like, oh, they used the public coffers to get a jump start, and then got the bank to give them a loan. I mean, that's the history. I mean, like, it's not like rocket science here. You know what I mean? So part of it is disrupting, for lack of the bullshit. Excuse my, I mean, that's just the reality. And we keep kind of talking in these circles around, like, what needs to happen. People know what needs to happen. They don't want to make it happen, because that means that they would have to give up something. And they really, and part of this violence narrative is like, then you also don't deserve, right, as a group to make that investment. You don't deserve it. And that's part of what the media is also intentionally or maybe unintentionally kind of propagating. Again, like we were talking about, like the Black youth over there. I wasn't even here for the 4th of July weekend. They're like, the Black youth downtown go wild. And then, but without the nuance of like, but there's also Black kids who had to go to work that weekend. There's also Black kids who had no idea what was going on down there. It's like all the Black teens now have to wear this scarlet letter because what the media showed was like this small group of young people, right? So it's now that becomes, so that's often the burden of the racism component. That's that institutional stuff.
Well, that burden also is something that is internalized in our own communities. You go on social media and you see everyone chastising or, you know, making, if I hear one more person who grew up in the 90s like us say, oh, back in my day, I could take the bus. I was like, really? That's really interesting.
That's what I'm saying. Like, they lying straight up and down. I'm just like, you said, they lying. They lying. Like, what? Like, stop. Like,
I don't even think they think they're lying. I think that they have, I swear I saw somebody from my high school say that their daughter, that their daughter couldn't, the daughter was saying, I can't believe you took the bus and you went to the mall, and everybody's chiming in. Yeah, back in our day it was so much safer. Back in our day, I just think every generation thinks the one behind them is worse. But I was like, I certainly remember not, navigating what color is going to be worn on that bus line or in that neighborhood. And there's just this collective amnesia, I guess, when you hit middle age.
Natalie, I would also say the big difference there is we start talking about like the wealth and that goes back to the narrative. There, at that time, you remember in the early 90s, at the end of Boys in the Hood, there used to be the struggle of even having the narrative told of like who was being murdered in the community, right? That the media didn't even cover it then, right? And when you thrust in terms of like, even in the 90s, I can almost remember like night and day when Chicago transformed. I mean, there used to be kids on every block all over the city playing outside, hanging on corners who had, were not part of any organization, no street organization, right? But once they start doing drive-bys in the 90s, all of that kind of shifted the fabric. So that also impacts then how people want to take the risk to open a business in these, our own people opening a business in these communities. But that's also just one part of it. The other part of it is that there have been, people have been traumatized. There have been things that have happened to people who have taken that risk and feel that they aren't getting supported. So, it's never just that cut and dry, either, binary kind of conversation. But I think that, we're at a critical juncture for Black Chicago is to figure out, because a lot of the Gen Xers now are saying like, why should I even stay here?
Yeah.
Why make this? I have an 8-year-old son. He doesn't have the existence. I wouldn't send him out and riding his bike like we did when we were kids. Now, is it that, it's because I can't take that chance. Even if the data says that he's probably safe, the kind of, randomness of how
Anton, it was more murders when we were teenagers than it is today.
Yeah, but it was also not as many. So I've been talking about that for years, but it's also like the fear of the randomness of it was not there also, because
I think the randomness was there.
I think so too.
I absolutely think the randomness was there. I think we talk about it in a different way because there are more news, there are more outlets, and social media amplifies it. But I mean, I remember my parents having that conversation about I think all of this is cyclical, but you're a parent now, so it's going to hit differently. Yeah, that's what I think it is.
I would just say there has been a transformation. You never thought that a young 8-year-old kid or 10-year-old would be at risk of being shot just because. just
Now,
randomly.
I don't know
It's a little
statistically, but it absolutely feels like it's more young people.
It's young people, like things that you.
Okay, you know the Tribune won a Pulitzer for this in like 1992 about young people randomly like this. I mean, who is the poster child for the random killing? It's Dantrell Davis.
Right. I'm so what, I guess when I'm not disagreeing with you, what I'm saying is that the heightened awareness of what that feels like is different now. And so
I'm just saying that maybe it feels different because you're a parent now and you're not a teen. There's an invincibility. I mean, I think about all the things that I saw driving the parties. I mean, the elements that we were in, even being from Black middle class Chicago, that wasn't a shield. I personally think that when you become a parent, that risk factor becomes different and you look at it from a different lens. And I say that as a parent too.
Yeah, I mean, but I do think it is different. Like South Shore is not the same neighborhood that when I grew up in South Shore. That first of all, there's no children outside anymore. That's what I'm saying. Like the basic thing of like, you don't see girls jumping double dutch on the corners anymore.
That's because you won't let your kids go outside on the corners and play.
Because
you go to other neighborhoods, then they are outside.
Yeah, I know when you go to Beverly, they are, but that's because there have been real instances where people have just been out and there's been the experience now. So what I'm saying is that
I thought South Shore was wild when we was growing up.
I say, I don't know. I thought South Shore was wild. I thought South Shore dudes from, the 7th Trade, come on.
Right, exactly.
Come on. I know we're getting real like in the weeds here. I'm hoping there's like Chicago people on this.
Part of the Black Wall Street conversation is understanding that larger narrative that that's underneath, what we're talking about is like that, what we perceive to be real versus what is real. You know what I mean? When we did the interrupters, I would say all the time, like, no one would guess this when I did the Impact campaign. Like, what year was the most murders? It still is 1974, the year I was born. They were stabbing the mess out of all kind of people then. You know what I mean? It still ranks as the highest, murder rate in the city of Chicago, right? But there is, yes, we have different ways that we can get our young people out now. I get the little message there, but I'll send them over right away.
I do. I mean, it shouldn't be random then. It shouldn't be random now, but it definitely was random back then too. And you can like go through, the Tribune and sometimes archives and see that. And these conversations, drive-bys were like this thing of like what is happening in our society, and that who would shoot up a movie? Remember grand opening, grand closing. Don't go to the Evergreen Plaza the opening weekend of a movie because someone random might get shot. But
Stoney from our neighborhood got killed when Boys in the Hood came out, and that was in 1991. That was a big thing. He was off the Hat Block, and Stoney got killed. Right. What I'm saying is that now has become like the standard. Like when that used to be an outlier, that feels like now that is kind of like the standard, as opposed to like you would hear it here and there. That seems to be often, and there used to be much more, and I still think it's the case, but I think that it's also part of like what, going back to this narrative that we're talking about, Black wealth and Black Wall Street, is that then we have to confront that misnomer in order to invest in our own spaces still, right? And to be able to take that risk ourselves in our neighborhood, to open up those shops like in South Shore or in Chatham. The small business owners, yes, it is a risk, period, as an entrepreneur. But, and I do see that is happening. I know several folks who have taken that risk. One of our mutual friends, they're taking it, they're in Park Manor, they are doing business. So there is something to, the times we're living in versus like there are these other narratives that people are like, yeah, that may be the case, but that ain't all the way the case. You know what I mean? So I'm going to still take the risk and go out here and make it happen. So I think that's also a big part of our narrative.
Tiffany, I'm going to pull you back in, and we've said a lot. Anything you want to respond to, or, as an entrepreneur, how do you weigh all of this?
Well, I pretty much, I'm from the Roseland area, born and raised. My parents are still there. So I was just listening in and chiming in on the conversation, just thinking back to and comparing to what the 80s and 90s was back then to what it is now. And I can kind of see where Anton was kind of chiming in. I do agree. I think personally, I'm not a parent, but I do think, times are different. These kids these days don't experience what we experienced, when I was growing up. We didn't have video games. So outside was, that was your live video game. Everything was happening outside. So I think just that times have just pretty much changed. I don't know for the better or for the worse. If you ask me, you can just leave me in the 90s and I will be a happy camper.
Still listening to Run DMC. You know what I'm saying? Times always change, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's life.
We can say that our grandparents or parents could say they had color TV. They got color TVs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So things are always going to change.
And our kids will say something different.
Absolutely.
About the next generation that comes along.
Yeah.
But the hustle, we talk about Black Wall Street, the hustle is still there. The drive is still there. So how do we get back to that? How do we create an environment? Man, look, 47th and Prairie, I dare you, drive by any day of the week. There's a Mexican guy out there selling corn, selling snow cones. He's probably making $300-400 an hour. At profit margins, probably around 80% profit margins, right? And so that hustle, the money is there. Right. So how do we in our community take advantage of that? We don't own sneaker stores.
No.
We don't fry our own chicken.
But maybe
J&J Fish. So the point is that maybe we don't have to start the thing as big. Maybe it's you got a grill set up, right? Maybe it's you got a storefront. I don't know what I don't know.
I think
it's there now. To your point, that it already exists.
Yep.
I mean, there are the Ghians, there are the Flies, there are the leaders of, there are these things that are out there. There are the hustle mans who are going to go and cut all the, so, what Natalie just got me thinking about, maybe it's also the narrative that we're grabbing of, of the deficit and not the assets. You know what I mean? What we are already doing. There are Black folks who are like, when people say the white folks are moving into the South Shore, then I meet like all the young Black people also moving and opening up a business. I'm like, well, it's kind of like defying, it's this kind of dissonance that we're living in is like at this, just the conversation we just had about violence, you know what I mean? So maybe there is stuff that is, well, not even maybe, there is stuff that is happening, Black businesses that are doing that. And maybe our work is to further bolster that. And not that it's lacking, that it's already present, and that we, there's more of a syndicate and more of a champion of, what exists, the Sips and Savers and, all these people who are doing well, despite all of the, this larger narrative of lack.
I think, and just to piggyback off of you two gents, I just think that it goes back to, I'm very spiritual, by the way. So I just think that it all goes back to, we were all born here with a passion and a purpose. And it's imperative for us to figure out what that passion and purpose is. And for me, I always used to teach my high school students, turn that into a business. And that's how we can kind of circulate and build our own communities. I mean, we all have something that we enjoy doing, right? So I would say for the foundation of it is to tap into that and then grow your business from that passion, because working for somebody else, we're not going to become millionaires that way. So we're going to have to start our own path, our own path, and be our own pioneers in our own communities and build up our own communities. And that's why I started with the high school students, because I felt as though they were the babies that are coming out into the real world and can find a way to figure out what it is that they need and or want to do, because they all want to become millionaires just by looking at what they see on TV. And it's like, baby, no. Tap into yourself, see what it is that you want to do and what you like to do, and then work from there, and success will ultimately happen. That's my truth, and that's how I ended up to where I am today.
Tiffany, I'm going to close out with you. There's a question from Isis that you're about to have a shop on 55th in a shared retail space. What does it mean to you to have a brick and mortar in Washington Park at the Green Line stop?
It means the world to me, especially at that location on 55th at the Green Line stop. It means the world because this is the community that I started my business in, 3 years ago. When I started my business, I came to the Washington Park area. I vended in a Hyde Park farmer's market. And just last year, I moved into this community because I felt as though this is the community that upholded me, that backed me, that supported me. So what better way to give back than to move into that community and show my appreciation. So opening that store on 55th, thanks to Arts Public Life and the University of Chicago, I'm truly thankful because they see the vision in tapping into the community of small business entrepreneurs and helping us grow and helping us scale our businesses. They're giving us opportunities that we probably would have never gotten to any other way besides this one outlet. So for that, I'm grateful and I'm super excited about the store opening.
And when will that open?
We are slated to open in the fall, October of this year.
And where exactly is it?
It's on 55th and it's at the Green Line, right below the Green Line station, right before you hit King Drive, going east.
Going east, okay.
Yes, yes.
Well,
So
great.
it's right next to the Arts Public Life offices. So we on the Arts Public block.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you, Tiffany, Ghian, and Anton for a spirited conversation. I didn't expect anything less.
You guys were awesome. I was super nervous, but you guys were awesome.
And so were you.
Couldn't tell you were nervous.
Oh, and Isis put the address. I'm sorry. She put the address. It's 319 East Garfield. That's the exact address of the store that's opening.
Great. I just want to plug the final Chop It Up, which will be on August 12th. And is this anything else?
No, I appreciated the nostalgia. I'll say that. And the connection of, our memories matter. And I think that's why people stay, is this connection to place. And if it is so stigmatized, I think, we lose people thinking this is a magnet and thinking that this is a cultural hub. So I actually think it's really important we talked about memory. So I appreciated that.
Great. Well, thanks to the audience. Thanks for the comments. And we'll see you all next month.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you both.
Thank you.
We'll share the report.